This is the IEEE Computer Society Distinguished Lecturer Webinar Series brought to you by the Distinguished Visitors Program. The Distinguished Visitors Program delivers tools for individuals at all stages of their professional careers through visits to chapters, offering opportunities for individual interactions, and to the membership through webinars by respected professionals. We have distinguished visitors around the world who cover machine learning, cybersecurity, robotics, big data, cloud computing, blockchain, and cryptography, among others. Chapters can request a distinguished visitor on computer.org/distinguished-visitors. The Distinguished Visitors Program is able to pay up to $1,000 for a visit to a chapter, but by working with other nearby chapters to develop a tour, that amount can be increased. So when your chapter is planning its next event, think of the Distinguished Visitors Program. Hello everyone joining us around the world, and welcome to our Distinguished Lecturer webinar series. Before we go any further, my name is Carrie Cosby and I'm the Chapters Manager here at the IEEE Computer Society. I oversee our more than 500 professional and student chapters around the world and manage our Distinguished Visitors Program. Before we get started, I'd like to get a couple of housekeeping tasks out of the way. You can ask your questions in the Q&A panel. Dr. Wack will answer as many questions as she can. Following the presentation, the webinar is being recorded, and the slides and recording will be made available after the webinar. Today's lecture is Quantifying Quality of Life of Smartphone-Centric Humans via Human-Centric Methods. I'd like to introduce our speaker. Katarzyna Wack, PhD, is an Associate Professor of Computer Science, Human-Centric Computing at the University of Copenhagen, and an invited professor at University of Geneva. Dr. Wack has also been affiliated with Stanford University since 2013. She holds degrees from Wrocław University of Technology in Poland, and Computer Science, the University of Twente in Netherlands, in telematics, and the University of Geneva in information systems is where she got her PhD. Dr. Wack, I'd like to pass the floor to you.
Thank you very much. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for this opportunity for giving this talk in this difficult times. And I'm hoping that after this lecture, you're going to look at the smartphone differently. I will start by getting into our potential users. So let's have a look. We have a case of a patient, a female, 69 years old. She has type 2 diabetes for many, many years. She had a heart attack a few years back and a hip fracture and replacement. She loves cooking, and actually it's also what brings her into trouble with her diabetes, too much carbs. So this is her kit for self-care. As you know, diabetes patients need to check their glucose on a regular basis and regulate it with insulin, medications, and wonderful cooking. This particular patient is a specific case of very stubborn one, because besides this particular checking her glucose daily, she doesn't have this little diary which you should bring to her doctor, healthcare practitioner, pointing out of the patterns of glucose getting up and down. She claims she can feel her body and she can manage her medication herself, and the doctors do not know what they are talking about. I know it because this patient is my mother. And this is a typical case of a patient which we see in aging population nowadays, with comorbidities, multiple diseases, and trying to manage their daily life, family life, and going through. But she's unfortunately not the only one. According to scientific research and really observational studies, we do know that our patterns of behavior in our life are killing us later and bringing us into lower quality of life. Specifically, here is, according to this paper, we do have Actually, World Health Organization is also pointing out that tobacco, alcohol, poor diet, and physical inactivity brings us into a lower health state later in life. And that's, let's not look specifically into statistical validity of these numbers, but these are the patterns of behavior which bring into some biophysiological damage and later on result, unfortunately, in a lower health state and lower quality of life. So yes, behavior accounts for up to 40, and actually recently I've seen also some pointers that it's up to 60% of our future health and quality of life depend on behavior patterns along the genetics and other factors, as you can see here. And in our research, in my lab, when I set up a lab on quality of life technologies, I actually did not know at the beginning, 10 years ago when I set it up, I didn't know what I'm getting into. And I have to say that I had along the way, I'm developing this particular vision, and I'm not the only one. And so you can see from literature also that my colleagues and some of us are calling it behavior marker, like genetic marker. Now we go into behaviors. And the point is that if we cannot measure it, we cannot improve it. And I hope you do agree with me in this. And let me tell you today how we can measure it in order to improve it. So when we start with the specific case of the doctor's office, the patient will come to the doctor's office and the patient will point out what are these symptoms, for example, what are the specific aspects of life or health which are bothering him or her. And we call it patient-reported outcomes. Patient-reported outcomes also, when some of you maybe know this term, relates to self-reported and validated scales for pain or fatigue or other aspects. And when the patient just starts a dialogue with the healthcare practitioner, maybe it will lead into filling up one of those forms. The self-reported outcomes is a specific subset of patient-reported outcomes on this graph on the left side. I'm sorry, and it's a self-reported outcomes are the patient-reported outcomes which could be observed. Like, for example, is the patient able to cook or drive a car or something like this? But that's the patient expressing himself, herself, the status. Now, on the other side, we have other data sources. Of course, there's a healthcare practitioner who is then making notes and making observations, maybe checking things with the patient, and maybe with respect to physical functioning, touching the patient, and exercising specific functions. And then we call it clinician-reported outcomes. Then the performance-reported outcomes beneath on the right-hand side, then it's something about checking the specific capacity of the patients. Maybe it's a treadmill, or maybe there's a test for cognitive, potentially cognitively impaired seniors. And then the last is technology-reported outcome, which can come in forms of anything technologically supported, starting from blood tests through different aspects of evaluation, technology-reported evaluation, technology-enabled. And we put here this little icon of Apple Watch, and wearable, although the original paper, which is referenced here by Nancy Mayo, doesn't even mention the word of wearables. Before I get into next step and explain how do we link this different data sources, it's important that I not forgetting the middle column. The middle column, observer or proxy-related outcomes, is when somebody else next to the patient is reporting on behaviors and states on the patients, on the observed ones. And the observer or proxy, in our recent research, we call it peers. They are the persons who are next to the individual and can indicate what was the behavior. And we do know these cases from children, where the parents are the proxies for children, saying the child did not sleep, the child eaten this or that, or for cognitively impaired older persons, for which the caregivers are usually reporting. So here we have, this is a data model, which we are leveraging in our lab and also in our thinking. And today I'm going to come back to this. And the next thing I want us to remember is I will refer to patient-reported outcomes as anything which comes as from the patient as a source, and technology-reported outcomes as anything which comes from technology, and it's reported quantitatively. So here we have an example of sleep assessment. Imagine that the patient will come with complaining about sleep aspects. And this is so-called Pittsburgh Sleep Quality Index scale, which is a validated scale for sleep assessment. And one of the questions would be during the past month, how often have you had trouble sleeping because you woke up in the middle of the night or early in the morning? So imagine that somebody will ask you this along the past month. How accurately you would be able to answer this question? Imagine that this day when you came to the doctor, it was a really bad night and you really have not slept well. You'll be very much biased toward answering that was really horrible and now we need to do something with this, right? So here we are. We're trying to change this particular situation in which the patient, the individual coming to the healthcare practitioner, maybe every 3-6 months or even less, have this subjective, memory biased, social acceptable answers because maybe there's something the patient doesn't want to talk about, but still wants to complain about, and a much more qualitative picture. And the big picture is actually that almost all of us have some smartphone, more and more percentage, it's more available, it's more affordable as well in different settings, socioeconomic settings, and the picture may look like this. So we almost have embedded technologies in our wrists, right? And the smartphone, it's along our past research already, and these particular numbers are getting updated. The smartphone is 88% of the time next to us, and that has been, as I said, quite many years ago right now. And nowadays we do have the wearables, right? At least I'm testing usually multiple devices. So I'm wearing at least 2 on me, sometimes up to 4 different devices. But these devices are not far, and they are being this proxy of our behaviors and our state. And this is an example where, out of my curiosity, there's a book chapter I'll refer you to. Out of my curiosity, in 2018, I found out a database of currently available devices. And I asked myself, what do they specifically assess? What kind of state they're looking for? As many of these devices, there were 438 wearables, which I evaluated and coded along different schema for how do they, what is the raw data source, what's the particular evaluation, what's the particular activity, what's the particular data stream, which is derived from the raw data, and then how does it contribute to quality of life? What would be the assessment for quality of life? So if you are interested in the wearables, I welcome you to get to this chapter, and also there is available, I made available the whole Excel file with 438 wearables coded. As you can see, we can be busy with a lot of different devices on our body. And actually, it was interesting. There were 12 different devices for feet to measure activity or other aspects. So how fascinating. The technologies are there. The smartphones are in our pockets. Wearables are on our bodies. So how do we leverage it? In our lab, we're getting into this new paradigm, and we're not the only ones here. Looking into this continuous, non-judgmental, sensor-based, context-rich, and much more frequent data sources, which will help us to assess better the patient state, and then in between the visits, and answer better the question, as it was in the past month, how often have you woke up early or in the middle of the night or too early, right? So this new paradigm is powered by the technologies. But before I get any further, I think it's very important that we quantify something, but we also set up a particular theoretical background. So quality of life we are following World Health Organization quality of life definition and the particular metric and instrument, quality of life breath. And it has 4 domains: physical health, psychological health, social relationships, environmental. And then it has so-called facets, 24 facets. You may think subdomains, starting from activities of daily life, going through different aspects of psychology, social interactions, and environmental. And then what is interesting is, oops, there's something with the animation. Quality of life by World Health Organization is defined as individual perception of their position in life in the context of cultural value systems in which they live in relation to their goals, expectations, statuses, and concerns. When you read this, you may think like, how you're going to quantify this, because you can read there's a lot of very qualitative and very subjective perspectives. But I'll try to convince you that we have ways, computational ways of supporting this particular quantification with respect to quality of life quantification. But what's the most important, I'd like that we agree. Okay, I'm sorry, I'm leading through different unexpected animations. So what I would like to say that the most important along this is that we pick up these particular domains and we pick up these facets, variables, and we look at them as different variables. So these are the variables which are validated, and they are very, they're assessed along their contribution to the quality of life. So from computational perspective, we are looking into how can we better quantify this particular facets, variables, and then how do they correlate, and which is more related to the other, and what are these interdependencies between them, as I will show you later. So, okay, so also it's very important to set up a stage of what do we define as health. So health has been defined as World Health Organization many years ago, 1946, as a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, and not just merely the absence of disease or infirmity. This has been criticized because it's very like a 1-0 approach with respect to health, where you have a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, or not. So you're either very healthy or very or immediately sick. So imagine you have not slept enough last night, and are you already sick? You're already missing health. So that has been criticized, and recently a set of important scientists came up together and published in 2011 this new definition of health: the ability to adapt and self-manage in the face of social, physical, and emotional challenges. And this is the theoretical background which we take in our lab of respect to how do you manage daily, how do you adapt, how do you change your behavior or not, and what's the journey rather than this specific destination of either you're sick or either you're healthy. So I wanted to say that getting back to the quality of life specific model and these 24 facets variables. So far, after 10 years of setting up the lab in different research projects, we have attempted to quantify 13 of these 24 variables facets. And I would love to say that we keep continuing the journey, and we keep researching, and would love to quantify 24 out of 24. And then also understand how not just individually these particular variables contribute to quality of life, or how do you quantify them, but also how they together can enable this self-management of behavior, this self-adaptation, this adaptation in face of daily life, right? So bending the curve also further in respect to providing tools, so enabling the quantification and enabling this interventions for behavior change and better quality of life later. But let's get back to details. So in our lab, we have a lot of experience with involving different participants. We call it Living Lab. But another aspect before I get into further, it's very important to understand the methodology. And for the students who are listening, I would really encourage you to think, whenever you do an experiment, whenever you design any specific data gathering, specifically human subjects, think of what are the methods what's your toolbox based on which you're collecting your data, quantitative, qualitative, different time scales, what exactly you're trying to assess or improve. Before you improve, you need to assess it accurately, right? So that's what I would like to emphasize here in our lab. We are very much focusing on accurate and reliable ways of and reproducible way of assessing these different aspects of daily life in 24 domains. So what we see here in this is a different set of domains, keywords, naming different research methods we're using in our lab. So we're looking into objective and subjective methods, so-called mixed method approach, and then from perspective of from the left to right, we really get into the smartphone. I'll show you in a moment how we get into smartphone. So we collect the data from smartphone, smartphone interaction. We collect data from any wearables. So we're connecting to API of different devices, manufacturers, and we are harvesting the data which we can. And then also on the smartphone, part of our software is launching so-called experience sampling method or ecological momentary assessment. Maybe you heard about this particular method, which is used in psychology, where this momentary assessment of the state is happening. So the person will have a little notification. How do you feel right now? Are you stressed? Do you have pain? And then we use validated scales, again, from the literature, from this domain of either medical domain, of quality of life domain, and we are leveraging the interaction into 1-2 clicks, and the person is giving the inputs to the system. Diary and data reconstruction method, DRM, is a method in which the person reflects on last 24 hours, which is by David Kahneman. It's the least biased, memory biased recall for last 24 hours. And when you talk about sleep, then we'll discuss with the person how is the sleep last night and what are the other aspects influencing sleep. Nevertheless, going further into interview and survey, it really depends on the phenomena. If we talk about sleep or physical activity or social interactions, right? So there'll be different types of interview or survey. A survey may be more generic, and the interview may be much more open-ended, tailored to individual. So collecting all these data sources and also the subjective and qualitative data need to be coded in order to be represented in the computational models. But I will come back to this. But you can see there is a richness of the data and different time scales, which allow us to understand the phenomena from different perspectives, not just by one interview or one survey or one way of collecting data or one day of sleep. There is enough representativeness. Also, I need to mention that usually our studies run for 4 weeks, 3-4 weeks, in order to get a view on representative data, as long as somebody doesn't go for long vacation and unusual activities in this 3-4 weeks. So I told you I'm going to tell you how we get into a smartphone. So this is our secret sauce from the lab, which has been developed as part of my postdoc at Carnegie Mellon, and then we continue developing the wonderful framework and infrastructure towards enabling human subject studies. But the big aspect is the logger. I heard different names for this, but I will stick to the logger, which can capture the state of touching the phone, the different on and off touches, different applications being used. Here are just the top 3 being used by this person: Messenger, Gmail, and Reddit. Then battery, charging, discharging, the Wi-Fi, mobile connections, and all the details, and then movement, still on foot, vehicle, bicycle. And out of this raw data, which is captured a very high frequency, I can see, and very reliably. We work on this infrastructure for many years right now, and we have it under really we evaluate the reliability very closely and continuously improve it. And then based also on this raw data, we can launch this experience sampling methods. For example, if somebody enters the house, then we will know maybe we should launch some question. Actually, now new project is about medication, right? So you'll not remind somebody about medication in the context of the person being totally outside of the home and not being close to where most likely medication is, unless that was the use case when the person is carrying the medication with him or her. But nevertheless, you can imagine that the context is very important of where do you launch this particular questionnaire, like how are you right now? So we have tons of experience with this data analytics, and we have a full infrastructure from a participant being monitored, being in the wild, as we call it, in situ, in the daily life environments, and being collecting data with the phone and a wearable and feeding our servers. Yes. And now I would like to get into snapshots of our research. I do know that we don't have a time for a huge discussion. I would like to just get your curiosity being awakened with respect to what's possible, getting the smartphone and wearable on the participants, and also reflecting on our own use of phone and what the phone usage and wearable data sets can tell about our behaviors and then quality of life. So getting back, each icon represents these particular variables contributing to quality of life. So you have physical, psychological, social, environmental, and I will just present a few of those leading up for further discussion, some of interest. So let's start with mobility. Actually, as I told you, the physical activity and lack of physical activity may contribute in really a big chunk to our future health and quality of life state. So we all started in the lab 2010, 2011. We all start from phone accelerometer. The phone was just having basic accelerometer, and then we asked our participants to walk on the treadmill and specific speeds, so there was a much more controlled environment. And then we also noticed and asked them to change the shoes or clothes and put phone in different locations, and we tried to validate a robust algorithm, which will then assess their physical activity on these different speeds and different conditions, and be this activity sensor. And that was many years ago, and we also have used this device, body media sensor, which has been then put on the arm, and it has evaluated as well physical activity from much more psychophysiological perspective. So it had also galvanic skin response and temperature and accelerometer, and then we use it as a reference point whenever the participants left the lab and went outside and used their phone as usual. But nevertheless, these times are long gone. And nowadays we have wearables. Here, what I'm presenting is we have a longitudinal study with 42 seniors over 65 who are living in Hungary and Spain. And then they were enrolled already in 2017, and some of them are still contributing the data to our lab. And we are having ethical approvals and reconsenting them and informing them about the new opportunities. And this, why is that? Because we're actually looking into this longitudinal pattern. So not just like how was your last week, how was your last month, but how overall you're doing and how much activity you have. So here we have just a snapshot of few of these seniors, and without getting into too many details about the numbers and who is whom, but you can see that there are different curves, right? So you're looking into even seasonal patterns. How is spring and fall different from the summer? And is Hungary different from Spain? And we really have a small sample size, but we do have already quite some great results, and we're looking into who consistently is not putting enough effort in their physical activity, and who would be the first person to go back and try to get into some intervention. But what I'm more excited about is looking at these patterns is to match it into known risk models for chronic illness, for developing chronic illness somewhere in the future, where we can operationalize the particular mobility patterns of the seniors and get them into these risk models where we will be able, hopefully, to classify the particular risk or provide boundaries of the risk for cardiovascular disease, diabetes, or it's all started with dementia, I have to say, but actually predicting risk of dementia is a super hard problem. So we lower our ambitions and said we may just want to look if the participants are following some specific recommendations for physical activity in older adults. And yes, when the state of the research will come closer, we'll be able to operationalize better the exercise, not just exercise. As you can see, it's in the as one of the risk factors of dementia, but there's so many other risk factors we should not be able to say that we are able to even predict anything. So we start with dementia, and then we lower our ambitions, and we go after cardiovascular and diabetes, where it's the physical activity and mobility could be then linked to the BMI, and then there is an aspect of blood pressure and cholesterol. But nevertheless, I just want to say that it's hard. We are really leading with we're really going after hard problems and operationalizing daily life and bringing them to this validated clinical models for risk assessment of cardiovascular disease or diabetes in 10 years, given much more clinical inputs. And we are not yet evaluating it in clinical settings. It's really all more towards what are the computational models we need to build in order to get some evidence. And also, as you can criticize me right now, it's the small sample size. It's like ridiculous in a sense, but it's the best we can do in order. Actually, we started with 75 seniors, so we already lost half of them almost. And then the ones who are contributing are living their daily life without. It's like observational study, living their life without being too much. Thinking about this reactivity that they need to move more just because somebody's observing them. And also I'd like to welcome you to check on our just upcoming research results, where we are looking into this regression models for also asking the seniors for self-reported physical activity. And one of the self-reports instrument is called IPAC, for physical activity assessment, and we look what do they say versus what do they do, and how do we co-calibrate the wearable data sets with the PROS, right, the patient-reported outcomes. We ask the person to fill up the forms every few months, actually, like every 6 months up to a year. And then in the meantime, we keep collecting this device data sets. So this is fascinating, but I don't have yet any specific results to show you. Very grounded with respect to saying that, yeah, now Fitbit, based on your Fitbit, we can predict if you're going to have heart attack in 10 years. No, we are far from this, but we are going this direction. So actually another aspect is from physical activity, right? So the previous slides, I told you we've been using Fitbit, and then now, how about the phone? The phone itself already, without getting into analytics of the accelerometer data, we're getting back to the phone, because the phone is, again, a very interesting sensor, having the GPS and understanding how much time is spent outdoors and what is the movements outdoors. And here we have two snapshots of different lifestyle of persons, where over 1 week, one particular person on the left visited many more places and spent much more time in these different places, while the person on the right had a more specific mobility pattern, and you can clearly distinguish top 2-3 locations along the 1 week of life. And we don't need for this accelerometer data. We have we look into the cell IDs. Sorry, I think I mentioned GPS, right? No GPS. We look at the cell IDs only, and also look at the repeated Wi-Fi We started with GPS, but then we realized that cell ID is very cheap available sensor because it's a phone for a reason. And then we're looking into mobility patterns of indoor, outdoor, top locations. And actually for privacy reasons, where you see our publications, for privacy reasons, we leave out even the names of the top locations, and we just look into the probability distribution and entropy of different locations. So that's interesting. So again, the phone it's a very powerful sensor, and the wearable is even better, but the phone is quite interesting to leverage with all these data sources. Now let's get into the sleep, and I'll show you how more accurate can be phone. And we started with wearable. The wearable we started with, it's unfortunately not existing today. Here you can see on the right-hand side, it's a Basis Peak Watch. Maybe some of you heard about this. It went off the market in 2015, and we have been looking into how working mothers are sleeping or not. And here we have we recruited 10 working. We tried to recruit 10 working mothers, and at the end we end up with quite good quality of data, 6 of them. And what we see here, our working mothers who have young children, at least one young child below age of 15, they're not sleeping enough, 5.5 hours, maybe 6 hours, most of them. And some of them, like subject number 4, or participant number 4, she slept 8 hours every weekday, but on the weekend she was catching up with socialization. And then subject number 5 or 7 tried to catch up with their sleep at the weekend. But what we learned from this, actually, it was very interesting, because it's a Danish working mother, and we were thinking maybe in Denmark there's such an equality, and there's such equality in care for children, and unfortunately, we can see that the mothers are not sleeping enough. And that's not just a 1 week. That's not like in student life, you may say, oh, maybe this is a specific deadline or something. No, it's on a regular basis, 6 months, and we're not sleeping enough. And another aspect which we learn, and I would encourage you whenever you do any analytics with sensors, it's also to understand what are the other factors influencing the data quality collected from the sensors, and also the phenomena you're searching. So here, I will not go into too much details, but when we started to go into data reconstruction method in interviews and surveys, we realized the importance of noise and temperature, the things which we know influence sleep. But then most likely we should also incorporate those in the computational models, right? And have additional sensors for maybe this smart home deployments. Light, noise, temperature, exercise before, exercise or alcohol before, that's interesting. None of them said that they go to sleep without being tired. So that was also interesting, right? Sometimes we may say, oh, I went to bed, I was not tired. No, for working mothers, never happened. Late food or parties or late caffeine, that was avoided. And there are other aspects of pets and family situation, which were influencing the quality of sleep. But nevertheless, when we went through this wearable, I will get back to the seniors. So I changed the little icon. We go back to Fitbit, and we're looking at our seniors and how do they sleep or not. And again, we are looking into patterns of their sleep through different seasons. And we understand that some seniors, specifically in Spain, may want to sleep, they do sleep more in the winter, and also they nap a lot. As we have this statement about the Spanish persons who are having a nap after lunch. And yes, some of our seniors do that. And then we look at the distribution of the sleep. And then again, we'll look into, are they sleeping enough? And is there something we should be doing in respect to helping them? But some of them are not sleeping enough anyway. And then again, that would be something to understand. Are they just suffering from insomnia, or there's some other aspects? And again, we're not talking about 1 week, not 1 week, not two weeks, not a month even. We're talking about years. So we have narrowly months of data for these seniors. But nevertheless, I wanted to tell you something more important with respect to these working mothers, when we when we involved working mothers in our research, we also involved 10 students. We wanted to have a diverse population and also understand maybe there's some statistical differences between these populations. But what also we did, we have instrumented the phone. We give them the basis watch, but we also instrumented the phone for the logger, right? So we knew when they switch on and off the phone, when do they touch it, or how do they charge it or not. So that was fascinating. So we had this working mothers, and then we had students, 10 students, and everybody was contributing data for 6 months. So what we did, here we have a table of sleep duration given by the basis watch. And then what we did, we looked when was the last time they touched their phone, and when was the first time in the morning when they touched the phone. And can we have a rough idea about the sleep duration? I'm not talking about sleep quality, I'm just talking about sleep duration. This on and off sensor, can it be a sensor for the sleep duration? And yes, to make a long story short, you may say that for the mothers, actually, okay, so I will start with the mothers. For the mothers, actually, it was not such a good sensor because in many cases, they were not touching the phone like subject number 3 or 4. They were not touching the phone, or they were like the basis watch, which was our baseline to which we have compared, was pointing out that the sleep patterns were different from the touching the phone. Subject number 3, for example, it was overestimating, the phone was overestimating, the person was just leaving the phone charging many hours before going to sleep, before really sleeping. So for this particular population, that was not a specific, a good result, but that was also a good result to show that for students, actually, the algorithm was much more accurate. This on and off algorithm for assessing what was the sleep duration was much more accurate comparing to what happened with their device. So we are playing, so the full, you have a whole citation, you can find the paper, you can ask me for details if you would like to understand it better. But it was interesting just to look at the on and off and how is that representing the sleep duration. Okay, so again, I told you I'm going to give a snapshots of different aspects of our research. So let's get into negative and positive feelings and stress, specifically stress. So we had 30 participants for 1 month. And again, we instrumented mostly the phone itself, so there was no device. And we look into how they touch and zoom and text, what errors they make when they write a text, how they swipe their phones, and what's the strength of touch and other aspects of touch. And then from time to time, there was this pop-up, how stressed you are right now. How do you feel? How do you feel, right? That's exactly the ecological moment assessment. So the stress along the day, we look into first statistical analysis, the stress are going lower at the end of the day, then getting lower along the week. The weekend is lower than the weekday as expected. Then we use machine learning techniques and leveraging all these different features derived from the raw data coming from the smartphone logger, understanding can the phone know how you're touching it, based on which we can assess and classify your stress levels. So the features, so again, there's a full publication reference below, but the features we're interested are the size of your touch, the length, how long you're touching the phone, what's the pressure at which you're touching the phone, how is the speed at which the input is generated, and all this different the scrolling and swiping and other features. And actually, how interesting is I would just mention that we found out that persons specifically, we also went to the individual level models for stress, and we found out that some persons using gaming on the phone were less stressed than the ones who are not using. So how fascinating. Or YouTube. Here is a game, different types of gaming applications. Okay, let's go further before I run out of time, telling you all these different wonderful pieces of research. We also look into personal relationships as a sensor. So let me tell you a story. So we're thinking again like this proxy and observer, as I told you at the beginning, we call it peer. The peer, somebody around me. Imagine that I would like to eat better. And there is my family kind of observing me, how am I doing, specifically nowadays when we are working mostly at home. So it could be that I will get a question, right? So this is an example of ecological momentum assessment. At this moment, and here is an example of question about stress, how stressed you are, how stressed I'm experiencing. But somebody from my environment will get another pop-up. And my peer, which I know that this person is trying to help, will get a question about how much stress is your peer projecting and how confident you are, right? So it's like our surrounding becomes our sensors. This momentary assessments are there. And maybe they're just next to me, which may be weird that they keep answering questions about me, but maybe they have been in touch with me and they know I'm stressed or not, I'm eating well or not. So depending what we want to leverage. And I don't have a lot of results here. I just want to say that we just have a JMAR publication accepted this week. So feel free to ask me for copy. Actually, it's going to be online for free. It's just forthcoming. It just has been accepted. But another aspect is also how good are the peers as sensors, right? How accurate they are. So we're looking into this quality metrics of how much, what's the correlations between my assessments and my peer assessment. Is my peer being my partner better than my sister, and all these different aspects of how fast they answer and how much what's the data quality for my peers, which will then help to assess my state better. Okay, so the last part, so I was presenting this 3 different aspects of quantification and really snapshots where the wearables and smartphones and the way we interact with the smartphone could be used to quantify different aspects of mobility, sleep, stress, and other aspects, and we have many more papers. But once again, I would like to get back to the fact that it's not just about building computational models. So what about the individual? What about the person, right? We also conducted a study with patients and non-patients. We were asked, how do they use the technologies which are in their hand for their personal care? And one of the patients, it was very interesting, said, I just want my life back, right? I just want my life back. I don't care about the apps or wearables. I just want my life back. So that's one of the aspects of getting back. But then we asked further, what's the current experience of quality of life and what really matters, right? And we know that there's validated skills, but we still wanted to learn what's important and why. Because then we wanted to know how does it relate to smartphone usage, right? So it's a family, relationship, health, and then what do I use? Facebook, calendar, gaming, news, maps, LinkedIn, WhatsApp, Bible, or other particular apps which are helping. So that's how fascinating it is. These are not the questions which are in the validated skills for quality of life, but we wanted to understand how do we already operationalize it and bring it further. So here, I'm running out of time at some point. So it's very important whenever you're doing research, you also understand the current point of view of your individuals. So some of them, when I ask, do you use technologies for your own healthcare? And they will say, no way. I'm not mixing my phone with my health. That would be one of the answers. Or I would, but I'm not sure. I don't know how to do that. And then when they do, they also have a lot of inputs. And each of these bullet points here, this little icon, accuracy, performance, battery, emotions, cost, social sharing, could be a research item in its own and domain. And it is. There are many of my colleagues working in human-computer interaction for interfaces and affective computing for emotional aspects. And there are colleagues who are working on battery efficiency, and myself, I also contributed. But nevertheless, there is a lot of different aspects which you just realize when you start talking to people without thinking, okay, I have my algorithm, I need to develop my algorithm, and accuracy is the most important, and I don't care about anything else. So getting back to the picture, I wanted to talk about my mom just for a second, because it's also interesting how technology can help her. Here is an example, maybe some of you know, it's a continuous glucose monitor called Freestyle Libre. And that's the snapshots of 3 days at which I visit my mother, and I could snap it on her and say, okay, please look at your glucose, but also she needed to do her own homework and her own monitoring, right? So I tried to put this the view on how that looks like if she would just do her own fingerprint pricks 3 times a day, or as she said, more or less 2-3 times a day, just more or less, because she, of course, feels her body better. And then she was so surprised that she would miss this particular highs. Like the second day, you can see that she would totally miss the total high going out of the scale of glucose, and then also understanding that it's different, that she thinks in the middle of the night when she cannot check herself, but also like how this particular sensor would help her. Another successful story is about she changed the medication and she got a worse sleep. So let me show you. So she said, okay, I'm sleeping worse. And then we got a Fitbit and we see, okay, changing medication around May, and then sleeping worse and not getting her sleep for 3 months. So you can see the data, 1 to 2 months, few weeks already. And then saying to the healthcare practitioner, I need to go back to my old medication. I cannot sleep. I need to go to the bathroom. I wake up. I lose time in the middle of the night. So here it is, data proven. I don't have a specific computational model for that, but it shows the point. So changing back to the old medications. So I told you we're looking into this particular co-calibration of patient-reported outcomes with technology-reported outcomes. Because so far, again, as you can imagine, you come to the doctor, the patient comes to the doctor, and there's a self-reports, and this is happening, this is not happening, and it's very memory bias and qualitative and very infrequent. Now, if we can have a technology to help us to understand the bigger picture, that's great. There's a lot of challenges and opportunities. I think I'll just summarize in a few sentences. The challenges are a lot related to human factors. Many of us do not want to change our behaviors, which are bringing us to the worst situation later in life. And also, this particular data sources are not validated clinically. So also the clinicians are looking into this wearable real-world evidence with really skepticism. So it's up to us computer scientists to assure the data quality, or to be very honest about what we can expect. And that's why in our lab, in my lab, we're looking at the trends. We're looking at the trends. We're not looking at an exact number of steps given by Fitbit or this or that. We're looking at the trends, how overall you're behaving. And if you continue like this, what's your likely future like? And I'm not even mentioning the data privacy and security challenges, because they're huge and recognized. But there's quite some opportunities with respect to understanding what happens between the visits, and how these technologies and how these data sources could help us. And this smartphone become even smarter, because so far it's a bit not smart in respect to helping us to take care of ourselves better. So it can work. We are proving it, and I'm welcoming ideas and feedback on this. We are showing that it can work, and also it takes a village. Oops, additional slides. It takes a village. I wanted to also say that it's not just me. I'm representing a team of very skillful students who are working with me in Geneva and Copenhagen, and this image, there's some image missing, but definitely the person was behind it. And we are looking for new students or new collaborators all the time, so you are welcome to contact me in case you are interested. Actually, we have an opening for a PhD student. And we are also interested in generating or cross-validating our models in different settings with different individuals. And yeah, I think given the time, I'll welcome the questions. Thank you very much for your attention.
That was a great presentation. Thank you very much. We do have one question out there right now. If anybody else would like to put your questions in, please feel free to do so. I do want to remind all of you that you will be getting slides after the event. And this question actually does have a part about the slides. They would like to use your slides in their university. It's the Kaunas University of Technology. So they're asking that up front. And then the second question they have is, do you use fuzzy logic approach in the quantitative evaluation? of the quality of life?
Not yet. Not yet. We use more, so far there was a lot of supervised learning, as you can imagine, and then we go into semi-supervised learning where we are looking into similarity between participants. And so actually there's a profile participants or individuals which we are looking, and then we're looking into how do they map to other individuals like them, so it's like people like you. And then what are the behaviors and similarity models? But no, this we don't use the fuzzy logic. No.
Okay, thank you. Also, this next person says, do you agree what data from wearables suffer from bias because they're being monitored?
The persons who are wearing wearable, if I understand correctly the question, the person who is being monitored collects different data.
It's probably how do they behave in a different way, specifically because of the fact that they know that they're being watched. They reference here the Hawthorne effect.
That is correct, yes. So for any of you who is thinking about any subject studies and human observations, at least 3 weeks of data. The first week, specifically if somebody never had a device like this on their wrists, or actually our app is the least intrusive in the sense this reactivity is the least, because it's besides the ecological momentary assessment, the person doesn't know what we're collecting and there's no information. On the other hand, you may say, oh, but they still kind of feel that they are monitored. So 3 weeks would be a minimum data logging experiment, specifically if you give there's some device which has a screen and they can see their steps and they can see the performance and they may want to compensate. We've seen it with our seniors, actually. 3 weeks. And actually, after 3 weeks, either they drop it and they give it to you and say, oh, it doesn't work. I don't know how to use it. I don't care. It makes me feel bad. Or they integrate in their daily life and then the data has been collected in the background. So excellent question. Very important. Yes.
And then I guess this is the last one we have up there, unless people want to add some other questions. But this person just says this is an excellent presentation and great research, which I completely agree with them. Thank you very much for presenting this to us. It was wonderful.
Thank you very much for listening. Yes.
I do want to say that I'm a bit scared of looking at my own mobility data these days. I think it's just from my living room to my kitchen to my bedroom, and that's about it. Oh, here's one other question. Here we go. How did you collect data from different smartphones? Do you have a specific designed app?
Yes. So it all started with Android. And for those of you who are into this Android world, you know that there was a lot of API and open data sources. And actually, Android opened a lot and then started to close. So also, whenever there is a new upgrade, we are, of course, adapting. And we're kind of losing. There are some few data sources for networking, specifically interesting, TCP/IP. And anyway, it was very interesting. And now it's getting closer and it's closed for us. We only have data sets for fast. The other aspect is iOS, of course. You asked about iOS, I presume. It's a very closed system. So we have only RAF mobility patterns and few other data sources, but not as detailed as Android. So we are mostly looking for participants with Android phones. And now it's more and more difficult, and it's also much more biased, right? Maybe there's a specific personality type which is using Android, so we're fully aware of that. And then we're trying to compensate with ecological momentary assessments. And then it's getting difficult, but we are hoping that we are going to get a particular collaboration also with the Apple and get some additional ways of collecting data. Yeah.
We've got a couple of more questions here. The next one is, what about failures of devices and shortcomings, such as I have problems seeing red on type, on black. Oh, okay, on type black, on black. Got it.
Yes. First of all, with respect to the failures of the devices, I presume it's a smartphone or wearable. We really try to get as much as possible data passively, and then we don't have an interface. Like if you can collaborate with us in the study, you will not have an interface yet. I hope one day, and also we are designing something for quality of life, but we don't have an interface yet. And we definitely will go into extensive user assessments. And then the colors, yeah, that's where the colors come in. And we rely on how these devices are designed and what do they give. And we do not lock them. We enable actually the participants, as I said. That's why this particular reactivity comes in, where they can see their steps or some particular performance metrics that they want to improve. So so yes and no. We take care of the data quality, but from different perspectives. I think I'll just answer it this way.
Okay. Will smartphone monitoring be the future of medicine?
I would say I would love to see it this way. However, there are some specific biophysiological signals which are missing. And yes, there are apps which are collecting the heart rate and heart rate variability, but continuously, we need something which is measuring continuously. So something closer to the body. And I'm not saying it's a bracelet. Maybe it's a patch, many more patches appearing, like I showed you the one for glucose. There are more for basic psychophysiology. Is the smartphone monitoring the future of medicine for a rough functioning? Are you leaving your house? Do you go around? Do you see people? Do you walk? Do you drive? Do you sit? And if you sit, likely the phone is also sedentary, let's say, and proxy to you. So on the rough way, and also as we see in the sleep duration based on how you touch the phone, it could be. But in order to get even into better understanding how is your heart rate and other aspects, then unfortunately we need something on the body. So that would be.
Okay. The next one is, what is the effect of region or location on the results? And I think this might be more a question of how whether it's been only in one place that you've done your study or multiple places.
How fascinating. Thank you very much for this question. So I have a student who finished the whole PhD on assessment of intimacy and the perception of safety in different places. And so first of all, I need to say that our phone, of course, collects this location data, right? The cell ID, Wi-Fi, and in the past we also used GPS, but then we stopped. So definitely we do have this as a context information understanding. How many steps you do here, and how would you sleep here, or do you sleep in the house, or are you in the hotel or traveling or something? For 6 months, things happen, right? But then the other thing is, I get back to my initial idea of telling you about intimacy and safety perception in different environments. So we had conducted study for 30 participants in Geneva, and then we conducted the same study and collected data in the United States. And the difference was amazing. Like in the United States, for example, location, being in the house was for both was quite intimate and safe. But for United States, some persons were in the school or work, they felt not so secure and safe and intimate. It was like, also they indicated that they are surrounded not by friends, while in Europe, I should not generalize to Europe, but in Geneva, the particular sample which we had mostly indicated that the persons they are working with, they consider as friends, or at least the persons they know them very well. While in the United States, it was much more strangers around at work and strangers around. And it's not about the type of work they were doing. There was also like office workers and knowledge workers. So, and another thing was also at home. At home, when there was housemates, they were mostly friends in Geneva, while in the United States, there were strangers. And there was also showing to my parents was more like I feel I'm with strangers. I need to show myself differently. So there's definitely that's about the cultural difference, and that was strongest. And it's very hard. It was very hard to represent it computationally because the sample size was small. But we have some publications on intimacy perception, different context, and you can find this description more qualitative level. And of course, in the future, we'd love to get it much more as a variable, right? With respect to where the data is collected and what's the sample. Yes. So there are differences, yes.
Okay, I think this is going to be our last question. This person asks, did you run into any problems with feature interaction on feature-rich phones?
Feature interaction, like collecting data about how people touch their phones and what are, oh yes. I mean, I will answer the question the way I understand it. So our phones are very rich devices. It's actually such rich devices that such a device 10 years ago sent the man to the moon, right? The same power as we have now in our pockets. So it's interesting how many things we can do with our devices. So in one of our research, which is now currently carried out by one of the students, is what do you do with the app? Like, I feel like this is the question about the feature interactions. Like, what do you really do? Like, you have a WhatsApp, or you have a text, or you have a text application, or you have a Facebook Messenger. And then what do you do exactly? What is the intention of you using? So what's the feature of the application we're trying to use? And how does it influence your experience? And how does it influence the way you touch your phone? So this is something which we go into. So like there was a WhatsApp Messenger or WhatsApp video call versus Facebook Messenger versus Facebook video call versus other, whatever, Signal, whatever you can name all of this, right? But what we are trying to get now into subsection of what's the particular feature, what's the particular task, actually called task, we try to achieve within the app, because it's not about an app, it's about the task, right? You want to achieve some task. You want to call somebody, you want to send or receive or consume or produce content. So we are looking into this. And it's a hard problem because for many applications, we cannot distinguish it. We will just know that we are using WhatsApp or using Facebook. And then we are trying to analyze underlying networking streams of data being sent or received and leverage it towards rough classification of what would be the task you are doing. Are you consuming? Are you producing content? Are you in two-way video call with producing and consuming? And also additionally doing the ecological momentary assessment popping up in case we're not sure and we are asking what was the task you're trying to accomplish and are you happy with this? So it's hard, and we do have some ways around. And if I can help somebody, please do not hesitate to contact me. Thank you.
All right, Dr. Wack, thank you very much for your presentation today. This was great. We all enjoyed it. I'd like to also thank all of you who have attended this presentation. In addition to the Distinguished Lecturer webinar series, we also have the Build Your Career webinar series that focuses on business soft skills such as communication and presentation skills, career transition, interviewing tips, among others. Our next Build Your Career webinar will be on the 18th of June at 11 a.m. Eastern Time, U.S. Eastern Time, on What Everybody is Saying. That'll be by Elsa Velasco-Paul, founder of the M&E Group. The next Distinguished Lecturer webinar series webinar is going to be on the 23rd of June at 1 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time. That'll be by Martin Jatoun. He'll cover 5 things you should not use blockchain for. The registration is now open for each of these, and we'll be sending you a link to these future events along with the slides and the recording of this webinar. Again, thank you very much for coming. And again, Dr. Wack, thank you very much. It was a great presentation.
Thank you very much, and have a nice day. Bye.